So this is something that pretty well everyone in the bow hunting community would know about and have very mixed opinions on this site. But basically, for those that don't know, this is the Garmin Xero A1i. So this is basically the pinnacle, in my opinion, of all bow sights on the market. So what you're looking at here is a product made by Garmin. Everyone would have heard of Garmin, and they're renowned for making really, really high quality GPSs, wearables, handhelds, all sorts of different high-tech equipment. And this is their first kind of foray into the archery industry. So what this does is you have essentially a rangefinder mounted on the front here. So you'll mount this to your bow, and this little button will hang down in front of your grip or on the side of your riser or whatever kind of is comfortable to you. And you basically pull your bow back, point your sight at what you're trying to hit, press the button. The sight will then range your target for you. An LED pin will appear on this screen here, and then you take your shot. It doesn't matter if it's uphill, downhill, it'll take in all those angles into consideration as well. So all you have to do is pull back and focus on the technical part of the shot. You're not worried about aiming, you're not worried about setting your sight, you're not worried about the angle. This sight takes care of all that for you. So why would people have mixed opinions on it? I guess the first thing is it's pretty pricey. So the A1i model is $1,400 in Australia. So that's quite a high retail price. But when you look at the technology that actually goes into this sight, if you were to buy a kind of mid-range to high-end rangefinder, you're probably looking at spending around the $600, $700 mark. If you're gonna buy a mid-range to high-end sight, or a high-end sight where you start putting a lens on it, a sight light, all these other features, you're gonna be spending $600 to $700 anyway. So you've got a $700 rangefinder, a $700 sight, you're there at the price of this sight already. The fallback of having a rangefinder and a sight is that when you're taking a shot, you've got to get your rangefinder out, range your target, go to your sight. If you've got a single pin sight, you've then got to adjust it, or on a fixed pin, you've got to pull back and work out, you know, say you range it at 34 meters, you pull back on a multi-pin sight, and you're kind of trying to aim between your 30 and your 40, but you're not quite sure if you're there. Plus, in the kind of heat of the moment when you're hunting, all these little distractions kind of amplify themselves, and it's not what you want in that moment. You want as much clarity as possible and as much simplicity as possible. The other problem there is if you've got your rangefinder and your sight, and you range an animal and you pull back and it moves. You let down, you range it again, it moves. You let down, you range it again, pull back and it walks off and you've lost a chance. So if you've been out camping for days, or you've spent weeks or months kind of hiking this area, working out all the patterns, and you get an opportunity and you've lost that opportunity because you didn't have something like this where you can range and make the shot all in one motion without having to let down, you're probably going to be kicking yourself in that instance. I mean, bow hunting, it's one of those things that there's plenty of guys that come into the shop that would have spent $400, $500 on their bow, walk out, first time they go hunting and they shoot a deer. There's other guys that will spend $4 grand, $5 grand on a full setup and spend months and months and months trying without success. It doesn't mean to say you absolutely have to spend the most amount of money on your sight to get the best return. You'll get the most advantage out of it. But bow hunting, just like target archery, is about giving yourself the most advantage you can within the means that are available to you. So you could go out and shoot a massive deer with a $30 sight. No reason why you couldn't do that. People go out and do it with bare bows without a sight. So why would you need something like this? You need something like this for those opportunities, like I said earlier, where you have an animal that's on the move, or it walks away, or it's behind shrubs and you can't get a clear range on it, or you're making a lot of movement, doing this, grabbing your rangefinder, putting it back down, moving your sight, doing all this movement with your hands. It's going to attract attention, especially if there are other animals around that have spotted you that you haven't seen. So that's why this is essentially the pinnacle of bow sights. There is a model below this as well, which is about $1,150, I believe. We've never sold one of the lower models. We've only ever sold the A1Is. This would probably be, I'd have to check through the sales records and stuff, but this would arguably be our most popular sight that we sell. It'd basically be a Garmin or a $50 Trophy Ridge or basic True Glow sight. They're the most popular ones that we sell because people don't want to take that risk. They don't, especially when they're coming from rifle backgrounds and moving into bow hunting, where they understand the importance of ranging and good quality optics. To be able to get a sight like this and take that guesswork out of the equation is critical to some people, and it definitely will make your life a lot easier, and you won't be kicking yourself if you have a shot opportunity that you miss because you're letting down, moving your sight, ranging, doing all that kind of stuff. The other really cool feature, and money saving and time saving as well with this sight, is you can save multiple arrow profiles. So say you've got a really good setup for shooting larger game like deer and pigs, and you're shooting an arrow that might be $20, $25 for the arrow with a $20 broadhead on it. So you're essentially throwing 45, 50 bucks worth of arrow at whatever you're shooting, which is fine. But if you're going after small game, shooting rabbits and foxes and stuff like that, you're probably not going to want to be throwing 50 bucks at every single rabbit you shoot, especially where they have a tendency to sit on front of holes, bushes, lakes, fences, stuff like that. You're going to be questioning your shots a lot more. With the multiple arrow profiles you can save in this, you could shoot something like a $10 pre-made arrow with a $3 or $4 judo on the front. So you've got a $14, $15 arrow for rabbits, and then you've got your $45, $50 high performance arrow for bigger game. You can just jump on here and choose a different arrow profile, and you'll have all of your pins or your single pins and distances preset there. So you're not having to worry about recalibrating for two different arrows, or some people will physically unscrew their sight, screw on a different sight for the two different arrows. There's always tolerances with that, even just in the way that you've threaded it into the riser. It's never going to be exactly the same. Whereas with this sight, your sight's not moving, it's bolted onto the bow, you're just changing to a different profile, and it really gives you that option to be able to have, you know, your arrows for small game, your arrows for larger game. Say you're shooting tournament archery as well, if you're shooting a competition that allows a rangefinder, you might have another set of arrows too, or you're comparing two sets of arrows. So you're wanting to see, you know, how two different sets of arrows group, but you're not wanting to change your sight in between them. You just press a few buttons on this and it's calibrated. So that's a really cool feature. The other benefit is having a single pin. So there's a few other range finding sites out there. I know Burris makes one. There's the IQ Define range finding sight as well. There's a couple of others on the market. This is the one that has the best clarity. And by clarity, I mean you've got a lens and you've got a single LED dot that appears. So you're not worried about cluttered aiming or bulky rangefinders or things like that. You're just seeing a very clear dot, which you can adjust the brightness of and kind of customize to what you prefer. So I, coming from a target background, prefer a single pin. I've used a multi-pin in the past, but especially when you get into the faster bows, the pins become quite cluttered. The problem with a single pin is you've got to adjust it depending on the range you're shooting. This gives you the ability to use a single pin without having to make that adjustment. If you look at target archery, now you'll find most of the technology from bow hunting comes across from target archery, because target archery is the proving ground for a lot of this stuff. Because when people are shooting perfect scores or a couple of points below, every single point, every millimeter makes a difference, and then that technology kind of translates across. You're not going to find a target archer shooting with a pin sight. Everything they're shooting is a very clear glass lens or a very fine fiber optic, just to give themselves the most clarity and the most simplicity when they're shooting. And that's what this sight provides as well. So having that single pin, I feel, is a real advantage, and having that without the issue of constantly changing your dial and then ranging and doing all that kind of extra movement, that's really beneficial to have that in the sight as well. You can also set up multi-pins on this if you prefer. So there is a function there where you can have essentially using it like a normal pin sight, so your pins will be displayed on the screen. It also integrates really well with other Garmin wearables. I believe it's the Instinct watch, but there's a few different others where you can actually track where it believes your target was. So when you fire an arrow at your target, it'll tell you on the watch kind of a ballpark of where to start looking for your blood trail or trying to track down your arrow as well. So that gives you a lot of assistance if you're trying to actually track down the animal or find the start of a blood trail. It's ultimately just, my view, the pinnacle of bow sights. I mean, people will argue saying you don't want electronics in the field. You know, you want just something simple, like a spot hog or a HHA, something like that that's rugged, no electronics, nothing that can go wrong. I think that's true maybe 10 years ago, but technology has come so far now that, I mean, most of the guys that are saying this obviously have electronics in their car. They'll be carrying an electronic GPS. I mean, it's just a way of life now with technology that has progressed to such a stage that it is reliable. And I mean, at the end of the day, if you're worried about it, put an extra set of batteries in your bag and that's pretty much it sorted. Now, I mean, the worst thing you're gonna do then is if you drop it and break it, which is the same thing that you could have happen with any sight on the market. One thing I will say is to definitely use lithium batteries for this. So it does say so in the manual, but just double check you have got lithium batteries installed, because if you use your standard alkaline, it doesn't quite give enough power to the sight, and you will find a few little variations with aiming as well and ranging. So make sure you've got lithium batteries in there. Again, if you feel like you're worried about being held back by electronics, like I said, chuck an extra pair of batteries in your pack and you're fine. The other limitation people kind of bring up when they talk about this sight is the weight. It's really not that heavy. I can't remember the exact specs off the top of my head, but if you put this on your bow, and then I put on something like at the moment I'm using a HHA Kingpin. If I put that on my bow as well, I can't really notice a difference in weight between them. You'd be talking something so small that if you're worried about it, carry one less arrow in your quiver or something like that. It's literally such a small difference in the weight. And it really is outweighed by the benefit you get out of the sight, and the ranging capability is the ability to store arrows and taking that guesswork out of the shot. So that's the Garmin Xero A1i, and it is available at elizaarchery.com.